The man was on a plane and encountered a serious air crash. The explosion caused a big hole in the cabin door. The strong suction instantly destroyed everything in the plane. Finally, the plane fell into the sea at a rapid speed. At the critical moment, he grabbed a life raft. He saved his life by luck with buoyancy, but the sea was stormy at the moment. Every second of danger could swallow him. He could only hold on to the rope of the life raft tightly. Fortunately, the man was lucky. The next day, he was washed up on a small island. He was not grateful for his survival because he didn't know what he would face in this strange place. He picked up the scattered items on the plane and walked towards the island. But it seemed that there was only endless silence to greet him. It was obvious that this was a deserted island where no one had set foot. In order not to be trapped here, he began to think of ways to save himself. He could only write a character for help on the beach. He couldn't think of any other effective way. Every day he hoped that a passing ship would find him, but as the night got darker, his expectations were gradually eroded by the fear of the silence around him. The next day, he used the items he picked up to make a temporary rest area. He began to examine his useful items one by one, but now he had nothing on his body except a pocket watch given by his girlfriend. At this moment, he regretted this trip. He was originally a senior executive of a FedEx company. Before the business trip, his girlfriend told him to come back before Christmas Eve, but this sudden accident broke his expectations. At this time, he didn't know how he was going to survive. He picked up a lot of express deliveries from his company, but he didn't open them, because this was the integrity of his work for him. Even if he was stranded on a deserted island, he still had to stick to the trust of his customers. But on this deserted island, in addition to the hard coconuts, he could not see anything edible. He came to the highest point of the island to observe the place, but there was nothing but endless seawater around him. He could not see any other creatures. Just as he was thinking about how to be rescued, a figure in the distance caught his attention. He thought it was a survivor like himself, but when he turned the other side over, he found that it was the captain who had died a long time ago. He dragged the captain's body onto the island and collected useful items from him, including a pair of shoes that fit him well and a flashlight that could still be lit. Then, he dug a simple grave for the captain and buried him here. At this time, Chuck was scared. He was afraid that he would die here like the captain. On the second day, he began to try some survival skills. He sharpened a stick on a stone and used it as a fishing tool. Although everything seemed so stupid, all this busyness also made him no longer desperate and delusional. That night he accidentally saw a faint light. He shouted desperately to attract the attention of the boat. At this moment, it seemed like he had seen a life-saving straw. Although he kept flashing the flashlight, the long distance could not attract the attention of the boat at all. Watching the light disappearing from his sight little by little, his heart was full of anger and unwillingness. The next day he couldn't wait to paddle his kayak in that direction. This was his hard-earned chance to survive. Even though he was full of faith in survival, he could not resist the endless sea. He was beaten back to reality by the waves again and again. He rushed to the distance countless times, but was finally ruthlessly pressed under the waves. With a burst of severe pain, his thigh was cut by the coral. At this moment, he no longer had the strength to escape. He could only drag the damaged kayak back to the shore in a mess. This time, he no longer had the strength to escape. He returned to the deserted island with the damaged life raft, but a violent storm suddenly blew that night. This was a further blow to the already injured Chuck. He dragged his bleeding leg to seek other shelters from the rain. Finally, he found a narrow cave. The next day, he woke up in pain. The wound on his leg had already shown signs of infection. Here, a deserted place. If he is not dealt with, he will face greater danger. In order to have a chance of survival, he can only abandon his obsession. Decided to open those parcels. In the package, she found a stack of videotapes, a volleyball dressed as a gift, an exquisite women's long skirt, and a pair of skates that looked the most practical. He did not open the last parcel. Maybe he regarded this as his last life-saving item. He applied the foam packaging of the parcel to the wound. Then he untied the shoelaces and bandaged it simply. The ice skates on the shoes became his most handy tools, and the black gauze on the long skirt was used by her to make a simple fishing net. With the help of fishing tools, he finally had his first bite of nutritious protein. In order to prevent raw food from being difficult to swallow, Chuck decided to start drilling wood to make fire, but the reality did not go as he wished. As his hands were rubbed and bleeding, Chuck's patience was also consumed. Life on the deserted island had already tortured him to the brink of collapse. He was even more desperate at this time. Chuck squatted on the shore and cleaned the wound with seawater. The excruciating pain forced him to face reality again. Now survival is a problem he cannot escape. He can only pick up the stick and continue to complete his life tasks. The volleyball he just discarded was lying at his feet. He suddenly had an idea to draw a pair of eyes on it with his saliva. Maybe he was lonely for too long. He decided to treat the volleyball as his friend and named the volleyball Wilson. With Wilson's supervision, Zach seemed to be full of strength. As he rubbed, the force was getting faster and faster. He finally created a spark. That night, Zach had never been so happy. This was the happiest time he had been stranded on a desert island. 4 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Zach had gone from a successful man to a savage on a desert island. Although he no longer had to worry about food with his fishing skills, but his eyes no longer had the brilliance they once had. He had given up any hope of waiting for rescue. That day, he picked up a piece of iron sheet by the reef. He stuck it into the sand on the beach out of boredom. A gust of sea breeze blew the iron sheet down. An idea flashed through his mind instantly. If he could use it to make a sail, maybe he would really have a chance to leave this place that had trapped him for 4 years. He couldn't just sit there and wait for death. He was determined to get out of this damn place. This rekindled his will to survive. The first thing he had to do was to build a boat. So he found a lot of branches and put them together. Then he tied them tightly with bark. The most useless videotape in the express delivery was used as a rope by him. As time passed, his raft was also completed. He prepared everything he wanted to leave. Now he could set sail as long as there was the right wind direction. That day, he carved a proof of his existence on the stone wall. It was a record of his having endured more than 1,500 days alone. When the last word was carved, the wind direction he had been waiting for a long time finally arrived. He excitedly pushed the boat into the sea. Then he rowed towards the sea with his volleyball friend Wilson. The surging waves almost drowned him every time, but he could resist them with strength. Every time he escaped danger, he felt more happy.
I think we did it! I think we did it!
Looking at the island behind him that had trapped him for 4 years, at this moment, he felt indescribable emotion in his heart. If he hadn't insisted on trying this wave of difficulties, he might still be living a lonely and hopeless life. Just when he thought he could just float back to the human city, a storm once again made him realize the reality. He could only hold the wooden boat tightly and pray. Fortunately, the storm did not kill him, but his boat was seriously damaged in this storm. More importantly, his old friend also got out of the boat because the rope loosened. When he reacted, Wilson had drifted far away with the sea. This was the only person he had confided in for a long time. Although it was just a volleyball, it was his spiritual pillar. He jumped into the sea desperately to save him, but the long distance made it difficult for him to move in this deep sea. At this time, he had no choice at all. He could only watch his old friend gradually disappear in his sight in despair. He lost his only friend. Loneliness and helplessness, the help surrounded him again. Looking at the almost broken wooden boat and the endless sea, he knew very well at this moment that he might never be able to return to his homeland. He threw away his oars. He decided to wait quietly for the sea to swallow him. Just when he was about to face death, the sound of the ship's whistle, which only appeared in dreams, rang out. He turned his head with his last bit of strength in disbelief. A huge cargo ship appeared in front of him like a god descending from the sky. A week later, he returned to his homeland again after years of hardship. His survival story made him famous in the streets and alleys. But he didn't care about all this. He just wanted to see his fiancée, whom he hadn't seen for 4 years. But when Kelly's husband pushed the door in, he finally knew that the person he had been thinking about day and night had already married and had children. The other party had been comforting his emotions and defending his wife. He looked out the window at his crying fiancée. He suddenly seemed to have come to his senses. His fiancée didn't seem to be wrong. If it were him, maybe it was the same choice. The company held a welcome ceremony for him that day and prepared a large seafood feast for him. Looking at the seafood on the table, Chuck felt unspeakable emotion at this moment. The crabs and fish that he was tired of eating on the island became the delicacies that people yearn for here. Everyone has a different perspective on life. What they expect is completely different. Just like Chuck, who has returned now. In his eyes, a table full of seafood is not as important as a lighter. The next day, Chuck delivered the mail that had been unopened on the island to the destination and attached a thank you letter. He thanked the other party for saving his life with the package. He was also more grateful for his package that gave him the courage to persevere. What was in this mysterious mail that had accompanied him for the longest time? He never chose to open it in the end. On the way back, he returned to the crossroads of fate again. He had to choose a direction to go on. Sometimes in life, you will really encounter some difficulties that you can't overcome. But please try to move forward again. Maybe one more step will lead to light.